Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. On the podcast with us today is Dave Van Horn, and since 2007, he has served as the president and CEO of PPR Note Company, a holding company that manages several funds that buys, sells, and holds residential mortgages nationwide. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Hi, Dan. How you doing?
Doing awesome.
Cool.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for being with us. And we just want you to kind of start us off and let us know exactly, what you're doing right now and where your focus is as an entrepreneur.
Well, my focus is a 10-year vision, right? And my vision is to have $1 billion under management in 10 years. But our mission is more on the socially conscious, impactful investing. So my goal lately, as I get older, is to have more of an impact in the investing and in the businesses I'm building, right? So everything I try to do now is to have more of an impact. So instead of just being a regular real estate investor, like I had been for 30 years, I want to have more impact in the things I do. So with PPR, our main goal is community stabilization. So we're primarily trying to keep homeowners in their homes, for example. And if the property is vacant, we're trying to get blighted property back into the tax rolls and into the society again. So, nobody wants a blighted property next to them. So there are two of the things that we do. And then on, as a company, we do a bunch of charitable stuff. We do events. And right now, our big event that we hold yearly, we donate all the proceeds to Project Home, which is to help the homeless. So a lot of the stuff we do is real estate and housing related in that regard.
So Dave, I know you have a large amount of experience when it comes to, real estate and into this residential mortgage space and, buying notes and things like that. I want you to walk us through some tough decisions that, you've had to make, or maybe one that really sticks out to you. Like I like to start off with one called the sore thumb tough decision, if you will. And it's one that really sticks out to you in your mind where you made a decision on something and it was a really tough decision and it really didn't go the way you had expected and it really wasn't the outcome that you really wanted. And you learned a lot of lessons from it. So you're, at this point, probably looking back, glad you went through it because you learned a lot through it. But do you have one of those tough decisions that you can share with our listeners?
I have a bigger problem than that. I was actually really struggling with the tough decision thing. And it was because I make a lot of tough decisions and I was actually like, well, how do I categorize these? And a lot of, I do a lot of decision making, not that I'm a super big company. I only have 30 employees. But I was looking at, tough decisions I made as an investor, tough decisions I made business-wise. But really, the toughest decisions in my life were more on the personal side. And it was just, and, business is personal. So I kept struggling with this, like, what were the hardest decisions? And I'm not so sure I found the answer, but there's plenty of them. Even as a small child, I had to pick a parent. I had to pick which parent I was going to live with. They were tough decisions. I've had to pick, taking someone off life support. I've had to pick experimental drugs on an infant to survive, like really tough decisions. And when I look at my business decisions, they don't seem as critical as the personal ones I've had to make sometimes. So it's kind of interesting. You really had me thinking from an really looking at myself. But I think on the business, I was kind of an entrepreneurial guy since the fourth grade. But the first big decision was to quit my day job. And I'd worked in corporate America for like 13 years. And to quit my day job was a big deal. And from the investing side, the big decision was when I first started buying houses with credit cards. That was like a gutsy decision I had to make because it was just so unorthodox at the time. And is it going to work? That type of thing. But I mapped it out. I planned it out. I analyzed it. I looked at it, and I made the decision. It was the right decision, and it set me on the path to become a multimillionaire. But even on the business side, my first business, I was a contractor. So I had worked for someone else, and I went to go on my own, and it was a big step to go on your own when you're not used to it. You're first starting out. I built that business, and luckily I was a real estate investor at the same time because I got hurt. So when I was 42, I was so fit, I hurt my back, and I guess you can relate to that. And I was physically unable to do physical work, right? I wasn't allowed to lift anything heavy anymore. And I was a contractor, right? And I renovated property. So I was pretty much out of a job at 42. And, thank God I had all the real estate that I owned because I could live off of it. And I kind of went out of business at age 42 and focused primarily on real estate. And then that worked for a while. I was been a realtor a long time and real estate related businesses, owned a title company, those types of things, but did property management. But then the market tanked. And that's when I made the decision to go into the note business. And it was funny when we first started our note company, we had another business. It was a short sale company. And the sign on the building said this, short sale name. And it had nothing to do with the note business. And the note business was in a small office in the back. Well, obviously the short sale business went out of business. And the note business turned out to be the real business. And we got into that business by accident, really. And, it was just one of those things that worked out. And we entered the institutional note business totally by accident. I was running a real estate investment group, and there were speakers that I would line up the speakers for the group. And one of the speakers was someone out of New York that was raising money for pools of mortgages. And they came down and spoke. And of course, I didn't do anything for about 3 years. But my partner, John, did. He invested some money and, got paid, high returns. And we're like, how did this work? So right before the downturn in the market back in 2007, we reached out to these folks and said, hey, if you show us how to collect on distressed debt, we'll buy a product from you. And then the rest was kind of history. We literally started out as investors. We were investors first. We bought 4 loans. One was a grand slam, one was a home run, and 2 we lost our money on. So, but it worked out. And then we started, using our own money and some JV partners and made sure the model worked. And then we started to raise capital, for private investors. And then, today, obviously, we've grown quite a bit. So we kind of started out as an investor, turned into a club, that turned into a business. And now we're like this enduring enterprise, so to speak.
Let me ask you this. So with these notes that you are buying, what are some of the tough decisions that, a person that is buying these notes has to go through or has to consider, before they get into the business, but also while they're in the business, maybe some tough decisions that they have to make, in buying these notes?
I always call the first decision is the decision to go into business, right? And for us, we were investing in delinquent second mortgages, right? Which is a crazy business to begin with. But we didn't have much choice because I was a RE/MAX agent, and I went from selling 75 homes a year to about 7. And my partner, John, was my loan officer, right? And I had another partner, Bob, who was a commercial guy. But, our real estate environment was tanking. We were out of business. We had nothing we were unemployed. So the decision was to go work in something else. But what we figured out was which side of the fence do we want to be on in this downturn? And we focused on distressed debt. So that was the first decision. But then shortly after we got into business, we actually got ripped off by a note seller to the tune of $2 million.
Wow.
So the first decision there was to pursue it. And we actually did chase this down, and we got repaid every dime with interest, but it took about 4 to 4.5 years. So I guess that was a tough decision to continue on. A lot of companies would have folded. We persisted through. Basically, we worked for free for a while. That's kind of what happened. And then I think later on, as the company progressed and grew, and, we're, pretty good sized company today, I think the more recent decision was to change our business model, because obviously we have a lot more capital under management. We do first mortgages primarily now. And we also incorporated open book management. So we kind of changed the way, the business evolved. It became bigger than me. And then now I'm looking at, there's actually a great book called The Second Decision that's out there. And I'm also reading another one called Finish Big by Bo Burlingham. It's another good book, is to, how do you exit gracefully? How do you build the company to sell or to continue on after you're no longer there? Or, how do you have more of a corporate image than, the image of, just Dave or whatever? I mean, I know PPR has a brand of its own as well, but so how do you, build a sustainable business that is, well, number one, saleable or could continue on without you? Or, how do you exit gracefully? Do you sell to your employees? There's all kinds of alternatives and things to think about that probably aren't talked about enough out there.
And it's interesting that you talk about exiting strategically, because I recently read a book. It was called Built to Sell. I can't remember the author's name. I'm already bad with author names, but I know I usually can pull out the titles. But it was a really good book too, because it kind of, I don't know, have you actually read that one, Dave?
I'm trying to remember if I did or not. I read a lot of books. I try to read about 25 to 30 a year. And I'm a weird guy because I read like 4 and 5 books at a time, and my son laughs at me. He's like, why don't you just read one book and finish it? And I go, I can't do that. I'm a person with a little bit of, ADD or whatever, where I get bored and I switch around and I have books all over my house. I'm kind of a weird person.
It sounds like the way I read books too.
That's great.
Can you share with us something that you like to do when you're facing, these tough decisions? Like, is there a certain strategy that you go through, or a process when you have some tough decisions that come your way?
Yes. So I have different levels of how I make decisions, and it depends on the degree of difficulty and how I categorize some of the decisions. I mean, some of them are simple as a Ben Franklin close, which is really just, you draw a T on the paper and you put advantages on the left and disadvantages on the right, and you just start writing them down. And something about putting it on paper kind of clarifies it a little bit for you. But I'm also, I'm heavily coached. So I've had every type of, from the Vistage type coaches to CEO think tanks. And today I'm in a group called Birthing a Giants, which is based out of New York City, and the Inc. 5000 guys. And I have some really unbelievable coaches. And they actually showed me a way to help with decision making, especially things like projects. How you have, I got 30 projects to do. How do I figure out which one to do first? And we all have limited resources as we grow our businesses, right? So it was really very helpful what they showed me. And all of us are hunting for leverage, right? We're always looking at, I think the number one question my coach asks me all the time is, what one thing is going to catapult your business in the next 6 to 12 months or whatever that is? Is it technology? Is it people? Is it capital? Is it education? What is it that's going to really make a difference? Is it software? So when we're hunting for leverage like that and we have multiple decisions to make, a lot of times there's several variables that could go into the decision, and that's what makes it more difficult. So what they taught me was a way to graph it. And I never thought to graph it and score it. And I was like, that's brilliant. I like that. And so what I do is I sit down and draw a graph, like a vertical and a horizontal axis, just like an X and a Y axis. And in the lower left quadrant, I put the number 1. And in the upper left, I put the number 2. And then in the upper right, I put the number 3. And in the lower right, I put the number 2. So then I take a decision that I'm contemplating. Maybe it's, I'll give you an example. Do I develop my existing controller into a CFO, or do I hire one from outside the company that's more experienced? That's an example, right? And then I'll look at, on the left-hand side of the horizontal axis, I'll put short-term, like a short-term initiative. And on the right side, I'll put a long-term initiative. And on the vertical, I'll put highly strategic or highly tactical. And then I'll graph that. And then sometimes I'll even graph it more than once. I might do another graph that on the left, it'll say easy, and on the right, it'll say complicated. And on the upper axis, it'll say highly impactful, and on the lower axis, say less impactful. And you kind of see what I'm doing, right? I'm scoring. It's hard to say it in audio, right? But I'm trying to get you to visualize it. So I basically graph, how impactful, how complicated or easy it is, versus how strategic and how short or long term it is. And then I can kind of go, so now I have, say I have 20 or 30 initiatives. I have limited resources. I have limited capital. I have limited personnel. How do I get the most impactful things done, quickest, easy, low-hanging fruit, whatever that is, to maximize the leverage to really, grow my, really make an impact on what I'm trying to do with the leverage that I'm trying to utilize,
Yes, I haven't actually heard that strategy before, but it sounds very interesting. Would it be possible for you to kind of draw an example of that and then email it to me, and then I'll include it in the show notes so that the listeners can kind of look at the show notes and get an example of what that strategy would look like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's easy enough to do. The other thing is sometimes I'll present it to my team. I'll listen to everybody's opinions. Like I have an upper management team. We meet weekly. We call them our level 10 meetings, and we always have we go around the room and we have issues to discuss and solve, right? And some of them are short, some of them have to be solved in the next 2 weeks. Some of them have to be solved in less than 90 days. And some things are, on a list for 90 days or longer. And then we kind of go through those as well. And then a lot of times, obviously I have to make the final decision on some things. But I also have a good network of other CEOs, because sometimes when you're at the top, it's a little lonely, right? It's not like I can... Well, you're fortunate, Dan. You can talk to your wife. When I go home, my wife thinks, a note is a musical symbol. No, she's great. She's brilliant at what she does, but she doesn't really know what I do. So if I go home and say, I'm having a problem, she might understand some of them, but you get what I mean. It's easier to talk to other CEOs. So there's a lot of good guys and gals that I know that are CEOs. They're in some networks that I'm in, and I can, somebody's always, I look at it this way. Somebody's had the problem I've had before. And it's probably one of the reasons I always like to read autobiographies of, famous presidents or generals and things like that, because they always had to make, big decisions.
Sure. I want to shift gears here a little bit, Dave, because I know that you have made some money up to this point in your life as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure that there's probably some things that you've done with that money that I'd like for you to share with us. So, has there been any exciting places you've traveled, or crazy or extravagant items that you've purchased with the money you've made up to this point as an entrepreneur?
I wish there was. No, you know what? I kind of came from humble beginnings, and with my job, I travel a lot, but most of it's domestic. And, like lately my goals, you might not know this about me. I have 2 sons and I have 3 grandchildren and another grandchild on the way. And I just got back from Disney with my oldest grandson, for example. And I get as much pleasure out of that as I would going to some exotic location, which sounds kind of weird. Now, my youngest son, we're actually trying to plan a trip to go to Europe because we want to go to the countries that are our roots, right? So I'm Dutch and Irish, and we're trying to go to Europe. And so those types of things. And he's trying to get me to go to China. So that's kind of on the bucket list right now, because my youngest son does like to travel a lot. And whereas me, my biggest hobby is reading, literally reading and writing, which is kind of strange. So I guess the biggest thing I've done with my money is I built a mountain house where I go and hide. And I know that sounds bizarre. And it was great for a while because you couldn't even get phone service or anything. And now, of course, you can. So it's kind of ruining it a little bit. But I just go away, and I like the solitude and being able to recharge and then that type of thing. But probably the most impactful thing I've done is going to sound bizarre. I started a drug and alcohol recovery center with my oldest son, who's in recovery. My oldest son's 34, by the way. And I actually had taken my primary residence, which today is a 6-bedroom, 3-bath place. And it's been a recovery center for over 8 years now. And that's probably the most impactful thing I've done. And it doesn't sound glamorous, but it's probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Well, and it's one of those things that, allows you to be able to, use the money that you've made to be able to impact more lives to, better this country and better this world at the same time. And I think that's great. I think a lot of times with our money, we try to create our own experiences, but even being able to create experiences for other people is important as well.
I use this analogy. I'm the type of person that is ambitious, but content.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. My last question to you is going to be about your vision board. What's the next thing for Dave Van Horn on his vision board right now?
On my vision board? Actually, this is going to sound neat. It does involve travel. As I get closer to retirement, me and my wife are focusing on a place close to home and our kids and grandkids. And then we want a place in a warmer climate with zero income tax state. And then want to remodel our mountain vacation home. And the reason we like that is we want the ability to travel anywhere in the world at any time. And it won't really cost us anything because 2 of the 3 places we plan to go through an Airbnb type model. And then we have our home base where we can crash and, that's our home kind of thing. And then the other 2, we can Airbnb out. And then we'll be able to go anywhere we want. And I'm starting out to try to get out of the day business. I'm starting with like 2 months a year, then 4 months a year. And then eventually, because most of the work I do at the company can be done remotely. So I've been slowly but surely replacing myself with my, the positions that I oversee at the company. And I've actually been doing a pretty good job at that. So I'm almost there. I had a 2-year plan. I'm over halfway through it, and I'm right on track. So
you're headed in the right direction and about ready to at least be replaceable if needed.
Correct. It doesn't mean, I don't want to scare anybody like, oh, Dave's leaving the company. That's not really it. It's more of the company's not going to depend on any of the key partners. Actually, we're trying to build in more redundancy. But the beauty of it is going to give me more freedom to do what I really want to do, because I do have some things that I want to do. I have multiple businesses as well. The Note Company just happens to be the major business. And my favorite thing is really commercial real estate. And that's where I first started raising capital for, mobile homes and storage centers and things like that. And that's really probably my first love, so to speak. But I do like the note business. I like that it's passive. And, there's advantages and disadvantages to both, obviously.
So, Dave, as we finish up here, how can our listeners get a hold of you or get in touch or follow you, get more information about you if they wanted to?
Probably the easiest way is through our website, which is PPR Note, NOTECO.com, PPRNoteco.com, or on BiggerPockets. I'm actually very accessible on BiggerPockets. I do quite a bit of writing, quite a bit of forum posts. Actually, just recently did a book through BiggerPockets called Real Estate Note Investing. So I do a lot of stuff there, but I do engage people pretty regularly. I also do some Facebook Live with them pretty much weekly. And it's a good way to connect with a lot of folks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being on with us. We've enjoyed having a talk with you today, and thanks, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, guys. Great talking to you as well.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.